What's going on, Jaguar fans, man? We are just one day away from the start of the 2022 NFL Draft, and I know you guys are just as excited as I am for this year's NFL Draft to see where the Jaguars are going to do in this year's draft, because there's a lot of positional needs that the Jaguars definitely need, but especially with the number one overall pick, I know there's been a lot of talks about guys like AIDAN, HUTCHINSON, JAQUAN, Evan Neal, Travon Walker. Let's see where the Jaguars go, but today I'm going to be doing my Jacksonville Jaguars 2.0 NFL mock draft for the 2022 NFL Draft. I already did my 1.0. If you guys haven't seen it, I will link to it up above. But two things that I'm going to be doing similar from my 1.0 to my 2.0 today is the fact that I did make a realistic trade in my last mock draft, so I'm going to be making a realistic trade in this 2.0 mock draft as well, and I'll discuss it further when we get to that trade. But something that I also did similar with my 1.0, my 2.0 is the fact that in my 1.0, I believe I did 5 rounds, but I did 5 or 6 players the Jaguars took. This one, I'm only going to be doing 4 rounds, but I have the Jaguars still selecting 5 players with that trade. So let's actually get into today's video. So with the first pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select edge rusher out of Michigan, AIDAN HUTCHINSON. The Jacksonville Jaguars are in 0 position, now having the number 1 overall pick for the second consecutive year, to take a boomer bust guy, to take a guy based off potential, to take another guy that they don't think will help them start winning games and change a culture. And AIDAN HUTCHINSON is going to be a surefire, productive day 1 starter in the NFL. Will there be some rookie bumps? Absolutely. Not every guy coming out of college is just going to seamlessly translate to the NFL. But I have religiously said on this channel, if you guys recall, on multiple occasions, that AIDAN HUTCHINSON will be the one edge rusher and one defensive player in this year's draft that will have a very good and immediate impact in the NFL, because he does not rely his game on raw athleticism and just pure talent. He's just that fundamentally sound. Great footwork, great handwork, very sound in his technique. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and he's just a hardworking guy. Very productive at Michigan this past season as a Heisman finalist. He obviously ended up losing that to Bryce Young, quarterback for the Alabama Crimson Tide. But HUTCHINSON comes in at 6'6", 260 pounds, 14 sacks this past season, 2 forced fumbles, and 62 total tackles. In that Michigan defense, he really turned it up, and even though he did struggle in the Peach Bowl versus the Georgia Bulldogs and that offensive line and Jamari Sawyer, AIDAN HUTCHINSON is a surefire pick. I don't think that this should be much of a discussion in my 2.0 mock draft. I think AIDAN HUTCHINSON's a great culture fit. He's a guy who gets guys lined up pre-snap. He gets guys rallying around him. He seems like a great vocal leader. He reminds me a lot of a Trevor Lawrence of a defense, how guys just kind of rally around this guy. And I think he's going to be a great culture fit for what the Jaguars need to build this culture up. AIDAN HUTCHINSON is going to go with the number 1 overall pick in this mock draft. So now that rolls me on to the second round, but this is where I made my trade. The Jacksonville Jaguars will be trading with the Chicago Bears, and they will be moving down. So the Chicago Bears will acquire picks number 33 and pick number 70 that we acquired from the Carolina trade with Dan Arnold and CJ Henderson. So that's what the Bears are getting. The Jags will be moving down 6 picks to pick number 39, and we'll also get the Bears round 2 pick number 48 pick as well. So in the second round at pick number 39 overall, the Jaguars will be taking safety out of Penn State University, JAQUAN Brisker. Now, this is not as much of a positional need. This is just in terms of value, what you're getting at pick number 39. I think you're getting the second best safety in this year's draft in JAQUAN Brisker in terms of the way the modern NFL is going. JAQUAN Brisker comes in at 6'1", 203 pounds. He's going to be a terrific box safety in these short and intermediate routes for the future of this team moving forward in this mock draft. Brisker in his junior season, after finishing up at the combine, ran a 4.49, and this past season he had 33 tackles. He had a defensive QB rating of 46.8 when quarterbacks were targeting him. He had a fumble recovery, and he had just 2 lone interceptions, but it's not really his job to be playing that single high safety like we see with a guy maybe like Kirby Joseph, where Illinois ran a lot of single high safety in the FBS this past season. When watching over JAQUAN Brisker, I saw a guy with a lot of size and athleticism. He's got the frame to match up with tight ends in today's modern NFL, because a lot of times corners are too small to match up on these big tight ends, and also we just see a lot more of dynamic tight ends being utilized in today's modern NFL. George Kittle, Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, the list goes on. He's got a guy with the size and frame to really excel when it comes to that, as well as I think he's a guy who's terrific in zone coverage, like I said, in these short to intermediate routes especially. I think he's going to play very good alongside a guy like Andre Cisco. Now, I'm not talking down on Rayshawn Jenkins or Daniel Thomas. I'm just not sure if they're the long-term answer. I wouldn't have a problem with Daniel Thomas to really get a legitimate shot and a real opportunity, but I think JAQUAN Brisker, in terms of value, is a guy you cannot pass up at this position at number 39 overall. And I do think that he's going to be a very good value pick for the Jaguars at number 39. That's where I got the Jaguars going. Now that rolls me on to pick number 48 overall, which is still in the same trade with the Chicago Bears. And I have the Jaguars taking linebacker out of Montana State University, Troy Andersen. Now, Troy Andersen, for you guys that don't know, because he's coming out of a small school, came out of Montana State as a dual threat quarterback, transitioned to running back, then he transitioned to linebacker and absolutely broke out onto the scene, and his draft stock substantially rose. And there is two levels of concern when it comes to Troy Andersen. Troy Andersen did have a major knee surgery back in 2019, but we're about 3 years removed from that, so I'm not as concerned with that. But then also the fact is he's only played one full season at linebacker in the FBS. So that definitely does raise an eyebrow for a lot of people in the NFL community. But for me, I think with the level of production he had and the traits and qualities in which he possesses, I'm not as concerned. And the fact that if he comes to Jacksonville, Mike Caldwell works great with linebackers. I'm sure Troy Andersen, with his speed and athleticism, will be able to come to the NFL game and really have an immediate impact. But at 6'3", 242 pounds, this man ran a 4.42 at the 40. This guy is a sideline to sideline type of guy who can play all three downs. Great size, great frame, has everything you want out of a modern day linebacker. Great and terrific in pass coverage because he knows how to read a quarterback's eyes, coming from the fact that he used to play quarterback when he first came over to Montana State. But in 2021, this past season, Troy Andersen, in 859 defensive snaps, recorded 150 tackles, which was the fifth most in Montana State University, 14 quarterback pressures, 3 sacks, and had a 65.2 QBR rating when he was targeted on 42 targets. This is where this guy came in and made a huge difference with this team, and I think he's got the prototypical size and athleticism to play all three downs, fill the run gaps, and be great in pass coverage. Troy Andersen, I think, is a guy who is quote-unquote falling but also rising in a lot of mock drafts and a lot in the NFL community. I do not believe this guy sits there at number 65. That's why I go and grab a guy and a transcendent linebacker, possibly in a guy like Troy Andersen, at pick number 48. Now in the top of the third round at pick number 65 overall, the Jacksonville Jaguars will be selecting wide receiver out of Alabama, John Mechie III. Now John Mechie III had 96 receptions this past season, 1,142 yards and 8 touchdowns. And while he did tear his ACL in this past year's SEC championship game versus the Georgia Bulldogs, John Mechie III, I think, has high upside to be a legitimate wide receiver number 2 in the NFL, and I think that he's going to come in and complement a guy like Trevor Lawrence significantly and help this offense out. Coming in at 6 feet tall, 195 job with his route running ability, great strides in the middle of the field, and even though John Mechie's not really more so like a burner, maybe like a guy like a John Ross, like a Kadarius Toney coming out of Florida, or maybe even a guy like Calvin Austin, who I've talked about on this channel coming out of Memphis, he's got great game speed, and he knows how to get into the soft spots of defenses. He's great in terms of continuity and chemistry that he had with Bryce Young this season. I noticed that a lot when watching Alabama football because, I mean, who doesn't watch Alabama football? But he's got good frame, good size, good hands, good route running ability. I like a lot of upside when it comes to John Mechie III. Do I think that he's wide receiver 1 potential with maybe a guy like George Pickens maybe, or Christian Watson, or any of those other guys? I don't think he quite possesses those traits, but I do think that in this year's offense, he can be utilized very well, and I do think that long-term, he's going to be a great answer for the Jacksonville Jaguars and this offense. And because I traded pick number 70 overall in exchange with the Chicago Bears, that moves me on to round 4, pick number 106. The Jaguars will be taking tackle out of Arizona State University, Kellen DIESCH. Now, Kellen DIESCH comes in at 6'7", 300 pounds. He wasn't the most productive tackle in this year's draft, but there's a lot of value that I think that you can get out of here and a lot of upside with him. I wouldn't mind if the Jaguars did try to go for a guy in Jamari Sawyer, who I briefly mentioned earlier in this draft, because I think he's a terrific offensive tackle who will probably fall to the late second, early third round in this year's NFL draft. Terrific tackle coming out of Georgia, and he really shut down AIDAN Hutchinson, so how funny would that be if the Jaguars took both of those guys? But I think Kellen DIESCH comes in, provides some substantial upside and potential moving forward with this team. I wouldn't mind grabbing him at pick number 106. So Jaguar fans, that's it for this video. I want to hear you guys' thoughts. What do you guys make of my 2.0 mock draft? And also, you got to remember, some of my needs and some of my thought process about what the Jaguars might do might be completely different than yours too. There's no right or wrong way to draft any of this, but I'm definitely curious as to hear what you guys got to say too. And if you guys haven't already, if you guys could drop me a like, it takes 1 second and it helps me in the channel out tremendously. And consider hitting that subscribe bell to stay tuned for more NBA and, of course, Jacksonville Jaguars content. Now, before I do let you guys go, I will be making a full breakdown video for the entirety of the Jaguars draft class. I'm not going to be sitting here making an individualized video for every single person that we draft. That's kind of a waste of my time. I will make one huge draft video once the draft is over for the Jaguars, and I'm super excited. Also, if you guys will be at the draft party tomorrow at TIA Bank Field, come and say what's up. I'll be out there. I'll be recording, vlogging, doing interviews, all that good stuff, man. And I'm super excited to see who the Jaguars draft with the first pick. Come and say what's up, man. I'm excited to see you guys out there and just be a part of the Jags community out at the stadium, man. Super excited. But that's it for this video. Thank you guys again so much for the continuous support. Brett James, a.k.a. BJ, I'm out, y'all. Go Jags, baby. Peace!